are you? Your worst fear. I am your demise.
The Catholic Church has spent over a millennium locked in spiritual warfare, battling entities so dangerous even their names were buried in secrecy. But now, the silence is broken. The Church is revealing 7 of the most feared forces ever recorded in real exorcism accounts.
Think of all the wars fought over religion. The Crusades belong in their own category.
Some torment, others take full control, and one is said to rival the end times. Stay close. What you're about to hear may be the darkest chapter ever told.
I'll destroy you. Your holy church will crumble from the inside.
Number 7. Ben Tamalian. In a shocking twist that no one saw coming, not even the church, one of the worst spirits to ever be documented didn't leave a trail of torment. He accidentally helped change the course of history. Deep in the annals of Jewish mythology, long before the Catholic Church rose to prominence, a peculiar monster named Ben Tamalian carved out a fleeting yet unforgettable place in history, an obscurity that makes his story all the more intriguing. Unlike the fire and brimstone heavyweights that would later dominate Christian demonology, this entity emerged in a tale tied to the 2nd century sage rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a towering figure in Jewish tradition whose wisdom and mysticism shaped the Kabbalah. Ben Tamalian's one recorded appearance unfolds in a kingdom ruled by a powerful emperor, a man whose iron-fisted reign included harsh decrees against the Jewish population, laws that stifled their freedoms and fueled resentment across his domain. It's within this tense backdrop that the demon chose to make his grand, albeit brief, entrance, proving that even the supernatural can stumble into a moment of unexpected benevolence. The trouble began when the emperor's daughter started acting strangely, her behavior veering into the realm of the bizarre in a way that no court physician could explain.
Baby's hungry, you fat cow! What? You never breastfed me, mommy!
At first, it might have been dismissed as a young woman's abnormality, perhaps a reaction to the stifling palace life, but soon her actions took a different turn, marked by frantic outbursts and an eerie fixation on chanting the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a man her father likely viewed with suspicion, given his influence among the oppressed Jewish community. Word spread quickly through the palace that something unnatural had taken hold of the princess, and whispers of possession began to ripple outward, carrying with them a mix of fear and fascination. The emperor, a ruler unaccustomed to helplessness, found himself in a rare state of desperation as his daughter's condition worsened, her voice echoing with the rabbi's name in a cadence that suggested something or someone was pulling the strings from beyond the mortal plane. Faced with a crisis that defied his usual tactics of control, the emperor made a surprising move. He summoned Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself, a decision that must have rankled his pride given the political climate. The rabbi, renowned for his spiritual prowess and unflinching courage, arrived at the palace with the calm authority of a man who had faced down far worse than a troubled princess. Stepping into her chamber, he prepared for what could have been a grueling confrontation with a malevolent force, a battle of wills between a holy man and a demon steeped in ancient malice. Yet, what transpired was anything but a showdown. With a voice steady and commanding, Rabbi Shimon called out, "Ben Tamalian, go! Ben Tamalian, go!"
Ben Tamalian, go! Ben Tamalian, go!
And in an instant, the demon complied, fleeing the princess's body as swiftly as a guest overstaying their welcome might bolt at the first polite hint to leave. No incense, no protracted rituals, no dramatic struggle, just a simple command, and the possession ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. The aftermath of Ben Tamalian's departure proved to be the real twist in this tale. Freed from the demon's grip, the princess returned to her senses, her strange behavior vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The emperor, overwhelmed with gratitude for the rabbi's intervention, took a remarkable step. He repealed the oppressive anti-Jewish laws that had plagued his kingdom, a sweeping act of goodwill that transformed the lives of countless subjects. In a bizarre twist of fate, Ben Tamalian, this obscure demon with no apparent taste for chaos or destruction, became an unwitting catalyst for justice, leaving the kingdom in a better state than he found it. a feat that sets him apart from the snarling, soul-rending fiends that dominate later church records. His exit was so uneventful, so devoid of malice, that one might liken him to a minor character in a morality play, popping in to nudge the plot toward a happy ending before vanishing into the ether. So, while Ben Tamalian made history by accidentally doing good, don't get too comfortable, because next on the list is a demon who had every opportunity to wreak havoc, but simply couldn't be bothered. Number 6. Belphegor. Among the infernal roster of Hell's elite, Belphegor stands out as a prince of demons whose reputation stretches back to the depths of ancient mythology, weaving through medieval grimoires to cement his place in the Church's long battle against the supernatural. Known as one of the 7 princes of Hell, a classification formalized by the 16th century demonologist Peter Binsfeld, Belphegor embodies the sin of sloth, a trait that colors his entire existence with an almost comical lethargy, setting him apart from his more ferocious brethren. His origins trace back to the Moabite god Baal-peor, worshipped in ancient Canaan with rituals so debased they scandalized even the Old Testament writers, as noted in Numbers chapter 25. By the time the Middle Ages rolled around, this once revered deity had morphed into a demon of temptation and idleness. His name carved into texts like Jacques Collin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal, where he's depicted as a monstrous figure lounging amid wealth and waste. Across the 1,300 years of church records, Belphegor's story emerges as one of unrealized potential, a demon with power to spare, yet too apathetic to wield it with any real malice. The church first caught wind of Belphegor through tales of summonings that required a rather unsavory offering: excrement, a detail that medieval chroniclers noted with a mix of disgust and fascination. This peculiar ritual, documented in Renaissance-era grimoires like the Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, made him one of the easier demons to call forth. After all, the raw materials were never in short supply, whether in a peasant's barn or a noble's latrine. Once summoned, Belphegor's presence was marked by an insidious knack for planting ideas of effortless riches in the minds of those foolish enough to seek his aid, a trait that earned him a reputation as a trickster peddling get-rich-quick schemes. Historical accounts from the 14th and 15th centuries describe merchants and alchemists who, after dabbling in his rituals, found themselves inexplicably drawn to idleness, abandoning their trades to daydream about gold rather than earning it, their workshops gathering dust as their ambitions withered. Unlike demons who revel in violence or chaos, Belphegor's influence crept in quietly, turning industrious lives into idle footnotes, a slow sabotage that left little trace beyond a pile of neglected ledgers. Exorcising Belphegor, however, proved a more complicated affair, though not for the reasons one might expect from a prince of hell. His high rank among the infernal hierarchy, commanding legions of lesser spirits, as noted in the Lesser Key of Solomon, suggested a formidable opponent, one that should have required the full might of the church's arsenal: holy water, Latin chants, and the iron will of seasoned priests. Yet, the reality was far less dramatic, as his defining sin of sloth bled into his resistance. Church records from the 17th century, preserved in Jesuit archives, recount cases where priests faced possessed individuals who simply refused to engage, lying listlessly in bed, muttering excuses, or dozing off mid-ritual, as if Belphegor himself couldn't be bothered to put up a fight. The trick to banishing him lay in persistence rather than force. Exorcists learned to outlast his apathy, reciting prayers for hours or even days until the demon, perhaps bored by the monotony, relinquished his hold and drifted back to the abyss. One French case from 1653 describes a baker's apprentice who, under Belphegor's sway, slept through an entire week of masses before the local clergy finally wore the demon down with relentless vigils, sending him packing without so much as a snarl. Belphegor made it to the church's list, thanks to his capacity for harm, which has resulted in ruined livelihoods and squandered potential. Belphegor may have preferred reclining in shadows over commanding infernal storms, but the havoc he wreaked through laziness, temptation, and a trail of wasted lives was no less insidious. His method was quiet sabotage, a slow decay from within. But not all demons are so subtle. Some shake the ground beneath your feet, literally. Number 5. Agares. In the sprawling hierarchy of hell, Agares commands attention as a duke of the infernal realm, a title that carries weight across centuries of church records and demonological texts stretching back to the Renaissance. Known from works like the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum and the Lesser Key of Solomon, this demon oversees 31 legions of lesser spirits, his name whispered in occult circles long before the church formalized its war on possession, a legacy that paints him as both a scholar and a troublemaker in the annals of the supernatural. His origins remain enveloped in the mists of pre-Christian lore, but by the time medieval grimoires took shape, Agares had emerged as a shape-shifting entity, appearing either as an elderly man astride a crocodile or a strikingly beautiful woman, each guise designed to disarm and deceive. Across the millennium years of Catholic history, his reputation grew not for outright savagery, but for a peculiar blend of intellectual mischief and disruptive power, marking him as a demon whose influence could unsettle the world in ways both subtle and seismic. The church first encountered Agares through reports of possessions that left clergy scratching their heads, cases where the afflicted displayed an uncanny mastery of languages, particularly the most profane and obscene words known to humanity. Historical accounts from the 15th century, preserved in monastic chronicles, describe a traveling merchant in southern France who, after a mysterious encounter near a riverbank, began yelling curses in tongues long forgotten, from ancient Sumerian to guttural dialects no scholar could place. Witnesses noted his erratic behavior, shouting insults at passers-by, mocking priests with obscene rhymes, until the local bishop intervened, linking the outburst to Agares after consulting a tattered copy of a forbidden text. What set these incidents apart was the demon's dual nature. Alongside his linguistic chaos, Agares wielded the ability to cause earthquakes, a power documented in grimoires as a literal shaking of the Earth's foundations. A 16th century Italian village reportedly suffered tremors after a shepherd, possessed and ranting in obscene Latin, collapsed in a field, an event the church later attributed to Agares flexing his might, though whether he intended harm or merely mischief remains a matter of debate among exorcists. Driving Agares out of a host proved a challenging endeavor, complicated by his knack for forcing runaways back to their origins, a trait that turned exorcisms into logistical nightmares. Church records from the 17th century detail a case in Spain where a young woman, fleeing an arranged marriage, fell under Agares' sway. She returned home against her will, spewing profanities in Aramaic and triggering minor quakes that cracked the village well. The attending priest, armed with the standard tools of exorcism, prayers from the Rituale Romanum, holy water, and a consecrated cross, found his efforts hindered as the demon clung to her soul, locking doors and windows with an unseen hand to keep her confined. Eventually, after days of relentless chanting and a strategic decision to bar her from leaving the house, the priest wore Agares down, banishing him in a gust of wind that rattled the shutters but left the woman unharmed. This pattern repeated across centuries. Exorcists learned to secure the possessed in one place, countering his power to compel movement until his patience, or perhaps his interest, waned, and he relinquished his grip, often with a final tremor as a parting shot. But while he played the role of the devil's linguist, our next demon wielded something far more dangerous than curses or quakes: desire. And he's got a temper and a taste for trouble that could land someone in chains, or worse. Number 4. Asmodeus. When the church finally revealed the 7 worst demons ever encountered over the years, it wasn't just the screamers and soul shredders that made the list. One name stood out for an entirely different reason: Asmodeus, a demon who didn't just possess bodies, he seduced them. He didn't break his victims, he tempted them into breaking themselves. For centuries, this prince of hell turned lust into a deadly weapon, dragging hearts, marriages, and even kingdoms into chaos. The church called him seductive. They also called him lethal. His earliest mention surfaces in the Book of Tobit, a 3rd century BCE Jewish text later embraced by the church, where he emerges as a jealous demon thwarting a woman's marriages by slaying her husbands, an origin story that paints him as both a romantic saboteur and a deadly force. By the Middle Ages, Demonologists, like those behind the Lesser Key of Solomon and Peter Binsfeld's classification, elevated him to one of the 7 princes of hell, assigning him the sin of lust and cementing his reputation as a figure who could turn desire into destruction. Asmodeus carved a path through possession cases that blended hedonistic excess with murderous intent, earning him a spot as a demon whose presence promised both ecstasy and peril in equal measure. The Church first grappled with Asmodeus in earnest during the medieval period, when tales of his possessions began filtering through European villages, often tied to inexplicable sprees of debauchery and violence. One striking account from 15th century Germany, preserved in a Dominican monk's journal, describes a blacksmith who, after a night of heavy drinking, awoke to find himself surrounded by the wreckage of a tavern brawl, tables overturned, strangers bruised, and a woman claiming he had proposed marriage in a lustful frenzy before attacking her betrothed. Clergy summoned to the scene noted the man's wild eyes and relentless advances, behaviors that defied his quiet nature, until they traced the chaos to Asmodeus, a diagnosis confirmed when he snarled the demon's name during an interrogation. What set these incidents apart was the dark undercurrent beneath the revelry. Asmodeus's lust wasn't mere indulgence but a possessive force, driving hosts to eliminate rivals with chilling precision. Also, a 16th century French case recounts a noblewoman's suitor who, under the demon's sway, strangled her husband in a fit of jealousy, only confessing after priests intervened. An act the Church attributed to Asmodeus's signature blend of passion and bloodshed. Exorcising Asmodeus demanded ingenuity, as his princely status and tenacity made him a formidable foe, though his peculiar weaknesses offered a rare advantage to determined priests. Church records from the 17th century highlight a breakthrough in coastal Portugal, where a fisherman's wife, possessed after a shipwreck, began seducing villagers and attacking their spouses with a ferocity that left the community reeling. The local exorcist, consulting ancient texts, discovered Asmodeus's aversion to water, birds, and fish guts, a trait rooted in his Tobit narrative, where the angel Raphael used fish entrails to repel him. Armed with this knowledge, the priest staged the ritual near the sea. Sprinkling the woman with salt water and burning fish remains under a cacophony of seabird cries. After hours of resistance, marked by shrieks and pleas for lovers who weren't there, Asmodeus fled, leaving the woman exhausted but alive. This method spread across coastal parishes, becoming a go-to tactic for banishing him, though inland exorcisms relied on relentless prayer and fasting to wear down his grip, often stretching into days of spiritual tug-of-war. Asmodeus was indulgence turned deadly, a master of temptation who didn't force sin but made you want it. But as terrifying as his grip on lust may be, at least the Church knew how to fight him. They had rituals, weaknesses, and a battle plan. But what happens when the demon leaves no trace, no obvious sin, and no clear way in or out? This next one is a lock-picking creep even popes couldn't crack. Number 3. Surgat. Among the lesser-known denizens of hell, Surgat emerges as a shady figure whose obscurity belies a chilling resilience, his name carved into the margins of church history through a single, unsettling encounter with one of its most audacious exorcists. His origins trace back to the grimoire of Pope Honorius, a 13th century text attributed, perhaps dubiously, to Pope Honorius III, a pontiff whose reign from 1216 to 1227 overlapped with a surge in medieval fascination with the occult. This grimoire, a manual for summoning and banishing demons, lists Surgat as a minor entity, yet his brief mention carries a weight that resonates across years of Catholic demonology, largely due to the weird moniker bestowed upon him, he who opens all locks. Unlike the flamboyant princes of hell, Surgat operates in the shadows, his presence marked not by grand displays of power, but by a quiet, persistent menace that defied even the Church's most formidable minds, earning him a reputation as an unknown wrapped in infernal subtlety. The Church first crossed paths with Surgat through the ambitious experiments of Pope Honorius himself, a figure whose legacy straddles the line between sanctity and scandal, his alleged dabbling in demon summoning a topic of heated debate among historians. According to tradition preserved in occult lore, Honorius sought to master the art of exorcism by confronting Hell's minions head-on, believing that such trials would prepare him for an ultimate showdown with Satan, a bold, if reckless endeavor for a man tasked with shepherding Christendom. The grimoire recounts how he summoned a series of demons, binding and banishing them with rituals meticulously detailed in its pages. Yet, when Surgat appeared, perhaps conjured in a candlelit chamber of the Lateran Palace, the encounter took an unexpected turn. Unlike his predecessors, who succumbed to Honorius's commands, Surgat resisted, slipping through every incantation and prayer like a thief evading a locked door, his presence lingering in the air as a taunting whisper. The Pope, accustomed to triumph, found himself stumped, unable to devise a ritual to expel this minor demon, a failure that left the grimoire conspicuously silent on how to banish him, an omission that would haunt exorcists for centuries. Subsequent encounters with Surgat, though rare, reinforced his reputation as a stubborn adversary, his possessions marked by an uncanny ability to infiltrate and persist where others faltered. Church records from the 14th century describe a case in a remote English monastery where a novice monk, tasked with guarding the scriptorium, began unlocking doors and cabinets in his sleep, muttering in a low, guttural tone that defied translation. The resident exorcist, armed with salt, holy water, and the standard Rituale Romanum prayers, attempted to drive out the entity, only to find the monk's behavior unchanged. Doors continued to swing open, and the demon's hold remained unbroken after days of effort. Drawing on the grimoire's cryptic reference, the priest identified Surgat, but with no prescribed banishment method, he improvised, encircling the monk with salt and reciting psalms until exhaustion set in. Eventually, the demon departed, though whether from boredom or defeat remains unclear. This pattern of trial and error exorcisms persisted across scattered incidents, each one a confirmation of Surgat's elusive nature, slipping into souls like a key into a lock, defying the church's usual arsenal, and leaving priests to scramble for solutions in the absence of a definitive playbook. Unlike Surgat, who slips in and stays put like a whisper in the dark, this next demon arrives like a thunderclap and brings an infestation with him. He is a buzzing terror you will wish stayed in hell. Number 2. Beelzebub. When the church finally unsealed its vault of horrors to reveal the worst demons it ever battled, one name nearly topped the list, not for raw violence, but for something even more terrifying: contagion. Beelzebub wasn't just a prince of hell. He was an outbreak. His possessions didn't stop at one soul. They spread, infected, and consumed entire communities, turning sanctuaries into slaughterhouses of hysteria. For over a millennium, Catholic exorcists feared him not only for the torment he inflicted, but for how quickly that torment multiplied. His origins stretch back to the Philistine god Beelzebub, worshipped in Ekron as early as the 9th century BCE, as noted in 2 Kings chapter 1 verse 2, before Christian tradition recast him as a fallen angel who plummeted alongside Lucifer, earning titles like Lord of Flies and a spot just below Satan in the demonic hierarchy. Medieval demonologists, from the Testament of Solomon to Peter Binsfeld's classification, linked him to gluttony, pride, or false gods, debates that only deepened his mystique, while his presence in church records paints a portrait of a demon whose possessions unleashed chaos on a scale few others could match. Known for his association with swarms of insects and his ability to spread like a contagion, Beelzebub transformed isolated incidents into communal nightmares, leaving a trail of terror that echoes through history. The church first confronted Beelzebub's wrath in one of the most infamous possession cases of the early modern era, the mass affliction of a French nunnery in Loudun during the 1630s, a spectacle that gripped the region and tested the limits of ecclesiastical power. Historical accounts, preserved in Jesuit chronicles, describe how the Ursuline nuns, led by Sister Jeanne des Anges, began exhibiting violent convulsions, snarling blasphemies in gruff voices, and clawing at their habits as if possessed by a collective fury, symptoms that escalated when swarms of flies inexplicably descended upon the convent, buzzing through windows and clogging the air with an oppressive hum. Local priests, summoned to investigate, identified Beelzebub after Sister Jean confessed under interrogation that a shady figure promising power had invaded her dreams, a confession corroborated by the insect plague, a hallmark of the Lord of Flies drawn from biblical and apocryphal texts. What set this case apart was its infectious nature. The possession leapt from nun to nun, turning a once quiet cloister into a battleground where hostility reigned, with reports of sisters attacking each other or hurling objects at bewildered onlookers, an outbreak the church struggled to contain as the town watched in horror. Exorcising Beelzebub demanded an ordeal of unprecedented intensity, as his high rank and tenacious grip rendered standard rituals woefully inadequate, forcing priests into prolonged and brutal confrontations. In Loudon, the effort spanned months, involving multiple exorcists, chief among them Father Jean-Joseph Serene, who employed a barrage of prayers from the Rituale Romanum, holy water, and relics of saints, all while contending with the nuns' relentless aggression and the ever-present flies that seemed to mock their efforts. Historical records note how the exorcisms unfolded in public, drawing crowds who witnessed the nuns' deformed bodies and heard their guttural taunts, a spectacle that ended only after Surin, nearly broken by the ordeal, claimed victory in 1637 when the last nun fell silent, the flies vanishing as abruptly as they had appeared. Later cases, like a 19th-century German farmer whose possession triggered a similar insect swarm and fits of rage, followed a comparable pattern. Teams of priests chanting for days, wielding crosses and fasting until Beelzebub relented, his departure often signaled by a final buzz of departing pests. These grueling battles underscored his reputation as a demon who clung to hosts with a ferocity that left exorcists drained and parishes shaken. Beelzebub may have been a plague bringer, multiplying chaos and turning single possessions into community-wide horrors. But even his fury pales in comparison to the ultimate source of evil, the one who set the stage for all rebellion. Number 1. Lucifer. After years of confronting hell's worst, the church finally named the one demon it fears above all others, not because he appears often, but because when he does, the very foundations of faith tremble. Lucifer isn't just a demon, he's the origin of rebellion, the architect of evil, the fallen angel whose presence in an exorcism isn't just rare, it's apocalyptic. While other demons infest, torment, or spread, Lucifer appears silent, calculating, and capable of unraveling the spiritual order with a whisper. When he shows up, the church doesn't just brace for battle, it prepares for the end. His story begins in the pages of Scripture, notably Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12, where he was depicted as the morning star cast down for daring to rival God, a narrative that evolved from a poetic taunt against a Babylonian king into the cornerstone of Satan's identity by the time of early church fathers like Origen and Augustine. Known as the Lord of Hell, the Serpent of Eden, and the Tempter of Christ, Lucifer's prominence in Catholic theology transcends mere demonology, positioning him as the architect of evil itself, a figure whose rare appearances in possession cases carry an aura of apocalyptic dread. Across centuries of church history, his shadow looms over every exorcism, yet his direct involvement remains an elusive specter, a paradox that amplifies his terror through scarcity and mystery. The Church's encounters with Lucifer in possession form are few and far between, with one of the most notable claims emerging from the late 20th century, when Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's most renowned exorcist and founder of the International Association of Exorcists, asserted he faced the devil himself in 1997. According to Amorth's accounts, detailed in interviews and later recounted in a 2020 New York Post article, the case involved a young peasant man whose possession defied explanation. Her body levitated. Her voice boomed with unearthly authority.
I am Legion.
And objects shattered around her without touch, symptoms that escalated beyond the usual scope of lesser demons. Amorth, who claimed over 60,000 exorcisms in his career, identified Lucifer after days of relentless struggle, noting a chilling intelligence in the entity's taunts, as if it toyed with him to test the church's resolve. Historical records offer scant earlier examples, though a 16th century Spanish chronicle hints at a nobleman whose possession unleashed visions of fiery ruin and cryptic prophecies, prompting priests to suspect the Prince of Darkness before silencing the case to avoid panic. An ambiguity that underscores Lucifer's rarity, as the Church often hesitated to name him outright, wary of amplifying his mythos. Exorcising Lucifer, when he deigned to appear, stretched the boundaries of human endurance and ecclesiastical power, with each recorded attempt unfolding as a grueling saga that left little room for triumph. In Amorth's 1997 confrontation, the process spanned weeks, involving a team of priests wielding the Rituale Romanum, relics of saints, and ceaseless prayers, all while the man's body contorted and her voice mocked their faith with theological precision. A battle that ended only when he collapsed, silent at last, though Amorth admitted uncertainty about whether Lucifer truly departed or merely retreated. Earlier accounts, like a 17th century German case involving a cleric who claimed to hear Lucifer's voice promising global ruin, describe similarly protracted rituals, days of fasting, vigils, and chants, culminating in an uneasy resolution when the possessed fell into a coma, leaving priests to debate whether the demon had been banished or simply paused his game. The scarcity of clear victories stems from his unparalleled rank. Unlike lesser demons, Lucifer's banishment lacks a playbook, forcing exorcists into uncharted territory where faith alone battles an intellect said to rival the divine, a challenge so daunting that church tradition whispers his presence might signal the end times foretold in Revelation. He's the mastermind who rarely dirties his hands, a fallen star whose shadow alone could unravel the world, a threat the church prays remains dormant. And with that, the countdown ends, but the shadows linger. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.